Good day! Hi, my name is Samantha Nicole. I'm Idel, and today we will be talking about chronic capitalism and economic crisis. But first, let's define it. Chronic capitalism is a system where a business success relies more on a close relationship and connection between business owners and government officials rather than fair competition in the market. The government gives special treatment to their friends, family, also relatives through privileges like permits, tax breaks, and other favors with the use of connections, which leads to unfair competition, corruption, and a weakened free market. That can lead to an economic crisis. An economic crisis is a situation in which a country or region gets into big trouble and experiences a sudden and severe decline in economic activity. Things like jobs, money, and businesses starts failing. Was the administration of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. really the golden age of the Philippines? The Marcos dictatorship, the year 1965 to 1986, is often portrayed by some as the golden age of the Philippines. So let's together study and analyze what had really happened back then, focusing only about our main topic, chronic capitalism and economic crisis. The key economic sectors, such as infrastructures, contracting, telecommunication, and banking, were controlled by Marcos' close allies, commonly referred to as cronies. These individuals were granted monopolies or exclusive deals without due process or competition.
For instance, the Bulacan nuclear power plant being one of the largest funded projects before, a project that Filipinos weren't able to put in a use because it is said to be dangerous to health. Westinghouse was the chosen contractor to plan and build it, and they were able to secure the contract even though they have the bigger quotation because of cronyism or connection. At first, the quotation for it was $500 million only, but when it was done in 1985, the quotation rose to 2.2 billion. And the awful thing about it is a waste of money and it took almost 30 years before the debt for its construction was paid off. Another example of a debt-driven and unused project is the controversial Manila Film Center. It was built because of Mrs. Marcos' desires for Manila to become the kings of Asia. The construction cost reached $25 million, and another $4 million was spent just for the opening night. The Manila Film Center was barely used and was eventually abandoned after a few years. However, those are just the few of their debt-driven infrastructures. Overall, projects often go to Marcos close ties, which means there is a higher chance of overpricing and less transparency and efficiency. And because of their unplanned and impulsive use of money, the Philippines eventually experienced economic crisis. Throughout his term as president, Ferdinand Marcos became very popular, mainly because he capitalized on his World War II hero status, though many of his claims were later exposed as false and inaccurate, and used government resources to strengthen his political base, particularly during his first term. This popularity helped him win re-election in 1969. Marcos was the last president in the entire electoral history who ran and won for the second term. During the 1970s, the Marcos administration undertook massive infrastructures and military spending funded largely by foreign loans. By the early 1980s, the Philippines' external debt had grown to about 24.4 US billion dollars, leading to a major economic crisis. Excessive borrowing, mismanagement, and unproductive projects triggered a balance of payment problems that forced the country to seek IMF assistance and implement structural reforms such as de-evaluation, trade liberalization, and reduced public spending. Marcos' economic policies also created powerful monopolies controlled by his cronies, fueling corruption and worsening inequality. As a result, real wages fell by about 20% in the year 1972 to 1980. Poverty rose from 41% in the 1960 to 59% by 1986, and unemployment jumped from 3.9% in 1975 to 12.6% in 1985, reflecting the severe economic decline under his regime.
And now, let's talk about people who is known for being Marcos cronies. Mainly Juan Ponce Enrile, Eduardo Cuanco, Roberto Benedicto, Lucio Tan, and Antonio Florencio Sr.
Juan Ponce Enrile served in several key positions under Marcos' administration, including Commissioner of Customs in 1965 and Defense Minister in 1970. After an unsuccessful Senate run, he returned to Marcos' cabinet. A staged ambush on his car in 1972, later admitted by Enrile, was used to justify the declaration of martial law. In 1986, Enrile broke away from Marcos, alongside Fidel Ramos and soldiers from the Reform the Armed Forces movement, helping spark the People Power Revolution. As head of the armed forces during martial law, Enrile was linked to human rights abuses and several corruption allegations. These include involvement in smuggling while at customs, granting logging concessions to political allies despite public opposition to illegal logging, and participating in the Levy Fund scam with Danding Kuwangko, in which funds collected from farmers were allegedly diverted for personal and business use. Antonio Floriendo Sr., a banana magnate from Davao, built his business by cultivating ties with politicians and became a major financial supporter of Marcos in 1965 and 1969 campaigns. He also acted as a front for the Marcos family in acquiring several luxury properties abroad, including apartments in New York's Olympic Tower and St. James Towers, estates in Long Island and Hawaii, and a Beverly Hills property. Florendo fled the Philippines just before the Marcoses went into exile. In 1987, he surrendered 70 million pesos and the titles to several of these properties to the Presidential Commission on Good Government. He admitted transferring large sum of money to actor George Hamilton on Imelda Marcos' orders, and acknowledged that several Marcos-linked corporations, Angkor, Calno, Kudo, and Camilton, were under his control. Eduardo Danting Coangco Jr. maintained close personal ties with the Marcos family, even serving as a godfather to Ferdinand Marcos Jr. alongside Juan Ponce Enrile. He was involved in the Coconut Levy Fund scam, where small farmers were tasked with the promise of investment shares that they ultimately never received. Coangco's wealth grew dramatically during martial law, with assets valued at about $1.5 billion, around 25% of the country's GNP. Using funds from the Coconut Levy and the United Coconut Planters Bank, he acquired the highly profitable San Miguel Corporation. The Marcos government also granted SMC favorable treatment, such as lowering excise tax on beer in 1986, resulting in about $40 million in saving for the company. Roberto Benedicto, a UP law classmate and fraternity brother of Marcos, became one of his most trusted cronies with full access to Malacanang. Under Marcos, he served as ambassador to Japan and head of the Philippine National Bank, where he approved large loans benefiting himself and other cronies. He used PNB to fund his own shipping and sugar businesses and build powerful connections in Japan. At his peak, Benedicto controlled a vast business empire, 85 corporations, over 100 sugar farms, media networks, telecommunication firms, real estates, vessels, aircrafts, and overseas businesses. By 1983, his net worth was estimated at $800 million. Lu Shotan portrays himself as a self-made businessman, but his rise to immense wealth was closely tied to his connections with President Ferdinand Marcos. With government support, such as high tariffs on imported cigarettes, tax breaks, and special exemptions, Tan gained a virtual monopoly over the Philippine cigarette industry for more than 40 years. During martial law, he reportedly evaded up to $50 million in taxes annually, and his company's lawyers helped shape cigarette tax laws to favor his businesses. Tan's monopoly allowed him to dominate the market at the expense of consumers and competition.
Those are just few of the people who are cronies of Marcos who benefited from their close ties relationship. There are many more important figures such as Geronimo Velasco and Roman June Cruz. Velasco was the first chief of the Philippines Ministry of Energy, which was established by Marcos in 1979.
A major controversy in his career where the government imposed levies and taxes on the retail price of gasoline. And Roman June Cruz. Cruz served as Undersecretary of Finance from 1968 to 1970, but he is more well known for his bankrolling Imelda Marcos's trips abroad using Philippine Airlines Fund, which he also managed.
Under Marcos, debt increased 50-fold from 599 million US dollars in 1965 to 28.3 billion US dollars in 1986, especially to fund his golden age of infrastructures and the enormous kickback that came with this. The peso value against the dollar plummeted from 3.91 Philippine peso in 1965 to 19.03 Philippine peso in 1985. Inflation soared and the prices of goods which only increased by half between 1965
which 64% increase more than quadrupled between 1975 and 1986.
Next is the end of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. The Philippines was dubbed the sick man of Asia after the Marcos dictatorship, and it has not gotten any better as neoliberal policies only got worse. Under Marcos, the Philippines suffered severe political repression, human rights abuses, and economic collapse. With billions diverted to cronies and political accounts, the 1983 assassination of opposition leader Benigno Aquino sparked public outrage, unitizing citizens behind his widow, Corazon Aquino. After a disputed 1986 election in a military revolt led by Enrile and Ramos, Marcos fled to exile. Aquino restored democracy, freed political prisoners, ended censorship, and returned state-controlled businesses to the private sector. With international support, the economy grew, though widespread of poverty remained.